On a warm summer evening in July 1991, 5 young scouts from the Pine Ridge Troop gathered excitedly around their campfire deep in the dense forests of Vermont, their laughter echoing through the towering pines as they prepared for their final night of camp adventures. Thomas Mitchell, the responsible 15-year-old patrol leader with dreams of becoming a forest ranger, checked his compass carefully while the cool night air carried the scent of pine needles and campfire smoke that reminded him of countless previous adventures with his beloved troop. Energetic Lucas Thompson, the youngest member at 12 years old, eagerly recounted tales of forest exploration, his voice filled with youthful enthusiasm that mingled perfectly with the crackling of the fire and the distant sounds of nocturnal creatures beginning their nightly activities. Sarah Williams, the thoughtful and artistic 14-year-old who documented everything in her worn leather journal, sketched the flickering flames with practiced strokes, her fingers stained with charcoal, as she captured the dance of light and shadow that painted their excited faces in warm orange hues. Michael Davis, the athletic 16-year-old who excelled at every outdoor activity, sharpened his camping knife with focused determination, the rhythmic scrape of the blade against the whetstone blending harmoniously with the distant hoot of an owl that seemed to call from the mysterious depths of the ancient forest. Emily Johnson, the quiet but remarkably brave 13-year-old, listened intently to every word while clutching her worn notebook filled with detailed nature observations, her breath visible in the increasingly cool air as she whispered thoughtful questions about the constellations beginning to appear overhead like scattered diamonds. Where are you reading from? Share your city and country in the comments before we continue this story. The scouts had carefully planned a short night hike to a nearby clearing to watch the anticipated meteor shower, promising their trusted camp leader to return safely before midnight to avoid causing any unnecessary worry. Their experienced leader, Mr. Robert Jenkins, had cautioned them repeatedly to stay on the clearly marked trails and keep their emergency whistles handy at all times, his voice firm but caring, as he reminded them of the forest's hidden dangers that could lurk in the darkness beyond their flashlight beams. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and purple, the 5 close friends set off confidently into the dense woods, their footsteps muffled by the thick carpet of fallen leaves and moss that had accumulated over countless seasons of natural growth. Unbeknownst to them, this innocent adventure would mark the beginning of a mystery that would haunt their families and community for years to come. A story of friendship, fear, and the unknown lurking in the shadows of the Vermont wilderness that would challenge everything they thought they knew about safety and trust. When midnight came and went without any sign of the 5 scouts returning to camp, Mr. Jenkins felt a cold knot of dread forming in his stomach, his hands beginning to shake as he checked his watch for the 10th time in 5 minutes while pacing nervously around the dying embers of the campfire. "They're probably just lost track of time watching the meteors," he murmured to his assistant counselor, trying to convince himself more than anyone else, though his voice betrayed the growing anxiety that was consuming his thoughts like a spreading wildfire. But Thomas was too responsible to break a promise, and the other scouts knew better than to wander off the designated trails, especially in the darkness of a moonless night that seemed to swallow everything beyond their flashlight beams like a hungry beast. By 1 a.m., panic had set in completely, and Jenkins roused the entire camp, organizing search parties with every available flashlight and lantern, their beams cutting through the oppressive darkness like desperate fingers reaching for hope in an increasingly hopeless situation. "Thomas, Sarah, Michael, Lucas, Emily," they called out in unison, their voices echoing through the forest and returning empty, creating an eerie symphony of desperation that seemed to mock their efforts and amplify their growing fear. The search continued through the night, with parents arriving at dawn after frantic phone calls, their faces etched with worry and disbelief that their children could simply vanish without a trace from what was supposed to be a safe and supervised camping experience. Local police arrived with tracking dogs that followed the scent trail to a small clearing about a mile from camp, where it mysteriously ended, as if the 5 scouts had simply evaporated into thin air, leaving behind no clues or evidence of their fate. "It doesn't make sense," muttered Detective Rodriguez, examining the scene with growing confusion and frustration. 5 kids don't just disappear like this without leaving some kind of trail. There should be more tracks, signs of struggle, something to indicate what happened here. The search expanded to include helicopters, volunteer firefighters, and hundreds of community members who combed through every inch of the surrounding wilderness for weeks, their determination fueled by desperation and love. Despite the massive effort involving state police, FBI agents, and search and rescue teams from 3 states, no trace of the missing scouts was ever found during those initial crucial weeks when hope still burned bright. The case remained active for months, with investigators following every lead and interviewing everyone who had been at the camp. But each avenue led to frustrating dead ends that deepened the mystery. As seasons changed and hope began to fade like autumn leaves, the families refused to give up, organizing their own search parties and hiring private investigators who promised to find answers that seemed increasingly elusive with each passing day. The years that followed were marked by relentless searching and unwavering hope from the families, who refused to accept that their children were gone forever and continued to pursue every possible lead that might bring them home safely to their loving arms. Thomas's parents, Robert and Linda Mitchell, mortgaged their house to fund private investigators and psychics, traveling across the country to follow up on reported sightings that inevitably led nowhere but deeper into despair and financial ruin that threatened to destroy their marriage. "I know my son is out there somewhere," Linda would repeat like a mantra, her eyes hollow from sleepless nights spent staring at his empty bedroom, where his scout badges still hung proudly on the wall like medals of honor for a war he never got to finish fighting. Sarah's artistic mother, Carol Williams, created thousands of missing person flyers featuring her daughter's bright smile, distributing them at truck stops, rest areas, and anywhere travelers might have seen something unusual 8 years ago that could provide a crucial clue. The Williams family organized annual vigils at the campsite, drawing hundreds of supporters who lit candles and shared memories of the 5 friends who had touched so many lives in their brief time together, creating a community of hope that refused to let their memory fade. Michael's father, a former military officer named James Davis, used his connections to access satellite imagery and military databases, convinced that somewhere in the vast digital archives lay a clue that civilian investigators had missed during their exhaustive but ultimately fruitless searches. Lucas's grandmother, who had raised him after his parents died in a car accident when he was just 5 years old, spent her life savings on reward money that grew to over $100,000, attracting fortune hunters and false leads, but never the truth she desperately sought before her death. Emily's parents, both dedicated teachers, started a foundation for missing children that provided resources and support for other families facing similar tragedies, channeling their grief into helping others while never giving up hope for their own daughter's safe return. The 5 families formed an unbreakable bond through their shared tragedy, meeting monthly to share new leads, comfort each other through dark moments, and plan continued search efforts that spanned multiple states and consumed their lives completely. Local media covered anniversary stories every July, keeping the case in the public eye and generating tips that investigators dutifully followed up on, though none ever led to concrete answers or brought them any closer to the truth. The Pine Ridge Scout Troop was disbanded after the tragedy, with many parents too frightened to allow their children to participate in overnight camping activities that had once been considered safe and character-building experiences for young people. The official investigation, led by Detective Maria Rodriguez, a seasoned investigator with 15 years of experience in missing persons cases, revealed disturbing elements that transformed a simple search for lost scouts into a complex criminal investigation that would consume years of her career. "Something doesn't add up here," she confided to her partner, Detective James Murphy, while examining the evidence collected from the scene with the meticulous attention to detail that had made her reputation as one of the state's most effective investigators. 5 experienced scouts don't just vanish without leaving any trace, especially with a responsible leader like Thomas, keeping the group together and following all the safety protocols they had been taught. The analysis of footprints revealed that the tracks ended abruptly at the edge of a small clearing, as if the scouts had been lifted from the ground or had deliberately obscured their trail using techniques they shouldn't have known at their young ages. More troubling still, investigators discovered tire tracks from a large vehicle on an abandoned logging road about half a mile from where the footprints disappeared, suggesting that someone had been waiting in the area with transportation and had planned this encounter in advance. "Someone was expecting them," Rodriguez muttered while photographing the tire impressions with her department-issued camera, documenting every detail that might prove crucial to solving this increasingly complex case. This wasn't a random encounter or accident. This was planned, calculated, and executed by someone who knew their movements and their schedule. The investigation expanded to include background checks on all adults who had been at the camp, including Mr. Jenkins and the volunteer counselors, all of whom submitted to polygraph tests and provided detailed accounts of the evening's events while struggling with their own guilt and confusion. Jenkins, consumed by guilt and desperate to help find the missing children, cooperated fully with investigators, providing minute-by-minute details of the last hours before the disappearance while struggling with the crushing weight of responsibility for the missing children under his care. "I should have gone with them," he repeated obsessively during interviews, his hands shaking every time he recounted that fateful night that had destroyed so many lives. "It's my fault they're gone. I was supposed to protect them, and I failed." The investigation also revealed that several suspicious individuals had been spotted in the area during the days leading up to the disappearance, including a man in a white van who had been seen watching the campsite through binoculars from the tree line, behavior that had made several campers uncomfortable, but hadn't been reported to authorities at the time. As the investigation entered its second year, federal authorities became involved, bringing advanced forensic techniques and resources that hadn't been available during the initial search efforts conducted by local law enforcement agencies with limited budgets and equipment. The FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit developed psychological profiles of potential perpetrators, analyzing similar cases from across the country to identify patterns that might provide insights into the scouts' disappearance and the type of person capable of such a crime. Special Agent Catherine Hayes, a specialist in child abduction cases with a reputation for solving impossible cases, reviewed every piece of evidence with fresh eyes, looking for connections that local investigators might have missed during the emotional chaos of the initial response. "We're dealing with someone who planned this carefully," she explained to the families during a tense briefing at the local police station, her voice calm, but her eyes reflecting the gravity of the situation. The location, the timing, the method of approach. None of this was random or opportunistic. This was the work of a predator who had been watching and waiting for the perfect opportunity. Advanced forensic analysis was applied to evidence collected from the clearing, including soil samples, fiber analysis, and trace evidence that might have been overlooked during the original investigation when such techniques were less sophisticated and widely available. The FBI also coordinated with law enforcement agencies across New England, looking for similar disappearances or attempted abductions that might indicate a serial predator operating in the region and targeting young people in outdoor settings. Computer databases were searched for registered sex offenders and individuals with histories of violence against children who had been in the Vermont area during July 1991, generating dozens of potential suspects who were tracked down and interviewed extensively. Psychological experts consulted on the case suggested that the perpetrator likely had extensive knowledge of the local terrain and possibly military or survival training, given the complete absence of physical evidence at the scene and the sophisticated nature of the crime. The families were briefed regularly on the investigation's progress, though each meeting brought more questions than answers, and the emotional toll on parents and siblings became increasingly evident as hope began to fade. Support groups were established for the extended families and friends affected by the disappearance, providing counseling and coping strategies for dealing with the uncertainty and grief that came with having loved ones simply vanish without explanation. Media attention intensified with the federal involvement, bringing national coverage that generated thousands of tips from across the country, each of which had to be investigated and ultimately ruled out as investigators searched desperately for the breakthrough that would solve this haunting case. In August 1999, 8 years after the disappearance that had haunted the Vermont community and consumed the lives of 5 families, a team of geological surveyors working on a new highway project made a discovery that would finally provide answers to the mystery that had tormented so many people for nearly a decade. Dr. Michael Chen, leading the survey team through a remote section of forest about 10 miles from the original campsite, noticed an unusual depression in the ground that didn't match the natural topography of the area and seemed artificially created by human hands. "There's something artificial about this formation," he told his team while examining the site with ground-penetrating radar equipment that revealed the presence of a large underground cavity that had been expertly concealed from casual observation. When they carefully excavated the area, they discovered a concealed bunker that had been expertly camouflaged with natural materials and appeared to have been abandoned for several years, its entrance hidden beneath layers of carefully arranged branches and moss. The bunker, constructed with military precision and attention to detail, contained evidence that chilled the blood of everyone involved in the discovery. 5 sleeping bags arranged in a neat row, personal items belonging to the missing scouts, and a detailed journal that documented their captivity in Thomas's distinctive handwriting. The journal, written in pencil on pages torn from a notebook, revealed the horrifying truth about what had happened during their final night hike and the weeks that followed their disappearance from the campsite, where they had felt so safe and secure. According to the entries, the scouts had been approached by a man claiming to be a park ranger who told them about a special meteor viewing area that required a short detour from their planned route to reach the optimal viewing location. Trusting the authority figure who wore what appeared to be an official uniform and spoke with confidence about the forest, they had followed him to a remote location where they were overpowered and transported to the underground bunker that had been prepared in advance for their arrival. The journal entries, written over a period of several weeks in increasingly shaky handwriting, described their captor as a survivalist named Marcus Webb, who had been living off the grid in the Vermont wilderness for years, sustaining himself through hunting and theft while avoiding contact with civilization and law enforcement. Webb had apparently planned the abduction for months, studying the scout troops' activities and waiting for the perfect opportunity to strike when the group would be isolated and vulnerable in the darkness of the forest, where no one could hear their cries for help. The forensic analysis of the bunker and its contents revealed a complex timeline of events that painted a disturbing picture of the scouts' final weeks and provided crucial evidence for the renewed investigation that would finally bring justice to the families who had waited so long for answers. DNA analysis confirmed that all 5 scouts had been held in the underground facility, with trace evidence indicating they had been confined there for approximately 3 to 4 weeks before the bunker was abandoned, for reasons that remained unclear to investigators. Dr. Sarah Martinez, the lead forensic anthropologist brought in to examine the evidence, discovered signs suggesting that the scouts had attempted to escape multiple times with makeshift tools and loosened floorboards, indicating their desperate efforts to free themselves from captivity and return to their families. These children showed remarkable courage and resourcefulness, she explained to the families during a difficult briefing that brought both answers and new heartbreak. They never stopped fighting, never stopped trying to get home to you. Their bravery in the face of such terror is truly inspiring and speaks to the character you instilled in them. The investigation into Marcus Webb revealed a disturbing history of mental illness, military training, and previous encounters with law enforcement that had somehow failed to prevent this tragedy from occurring despite multiple warning signs. Webb had served in the military during the 1980s, receiving specialized training in survival techniques and guerrilla warfare before being discharged for psychological reasons that were never fully documented in his military records. After leaving the military, he had drifted through several states, living in remote areas and occasionally surfacing in police reports for trespassing, theft, and disturbing behavior that suggested a deteriorating mental state and growing disconnection from reality. The FBI's behavioral analysis team determined that Webb had likely been planning the abduction for months, possibly years, studying the scout troop's activities and preparing the bunker as a long-term holding facility where he could keep his victims indefinitely. Advanced forensic techniques revealed that the bunker had been constructed over a period of several months, with materials stolen from construction sites and military surplus stores throughout New England, demonstrating a level of planning and preparation that chilled investigators. The journal entries provided investigators with detailed information about Webb's psychological state and his plans for the scouts, including his intention to train them as wilderness survivors who would help him establish a permanent settlement in the remote forest away from what he called the corruption of modern society. However, the journal also revealed that Webb's mental condition had deteriorated rapidly during the captivity period, with Thomas documenting increasingly erratic behavior and violent outbursts that terrified the younger scouts and made their situation increasingly desperate and dangerous. The manhunt for Marcus Webb became one of the largest fugitive searches in New England history, involving multiple law enforcement agencies and utilizing advanced tracking technology that hadn't been available during the original investigation 8 years earlier when the case first began. FBI Special Agent Catherine Hayes coordinated the search efforts, working with local police, state troopers, and federal marshals to track down a man who had spent years perfecting the art of living invisibly in the wilderness and avoiding detection by authorities. Webb is extremely dangerous and has extensive survival training, she warned during press conferences that attracted national media attention and brought the case back into the public spotlight. He knows these forests better than anyone and has had 8 years to prepare for this moment. We're dealing with someone who has made avoiding capture into an art form. The search teams used helicopters equipped with thermal imaging cameras, tracking dogs specially trained for wilderness pursuits, and ground-penetrating radar to locate other potential bunkers or hiding places that Webb might have constructed throughout the region during his years of hiding. Computer analysis of the journal entries revealed patterns in Webb's thinking and behavior that helped investigators predict his likely movements and identify areas where he might seek refuge based on his documented preferences and psychological profile. The investigation also uncovered evidence that Webb had been in contact with other survivalist groups and anti-government extremists who might be providing him with assistance or shelter during his flight from justice, creating a network of potential accomplices. Psychological profiles suggested that Webb's mental state had continued to deteriorate over the 8 years since the abduction, making him increasingly unpredictable and dangerous to anyone who might encounter him in the wilderness or attempt to apprehend him. The families of the missing scouts were placed under protective surveillance, as investigators feared that Webb might attempt to contact them or return to the area where he had committed his original crimes in some twisted attempt at closure. Tips poured in from across the country as Webb's photograph was distributed through national media outlets, but most leads proved to be false alarms or cases of mistaken identity that consumed valuable investigative resources and manpower. The search expanded to include abandoned buildings, remote cabins, and cave systems throughout Vermont, New Hampshire, and parts of Canada, where Webb might have established additional hideouts during his years as a fugitive from justice. Local communities were warned to be vigilant for signs of unauthorized camping or survival activities that might indicate Webb's presence in their area, creating a climate of fear and suspicion that affected the entire region. In October 1999, 3 months after the discovery of the bunker, Marcus Webb was finally located and apprehended during a dramatic confrontation in the remote wilderness of northern Vermont, bringing an end to one of the longest and most intensive manhunts in the region's history. A team of federal marshals and local police surrounded a makeshift camp where Webb had been living in a cave system, surviving on stolen supplies and game he had hunted illegally throughout the area while evading capture for months. "He didn't resist arrest," reported Special Agent Hayes during the press conference that followed his capture, her voice reflecting both relief and exhaustion after months of intensive searching. "I think he was tired of running and knew it was over. There was almost a sense of relief in his surrender, as if he wanted to be caught." Webb's capture provided investigators with the opportunity to question him directly about the fate of the 5 scouts, but his responses were often incoherent and contradictory, reflecting the severe mental deterioration that had occurred during his years as a fugitive living in isolation. During extensive interrogations conducted by experienced FBI agents, Webb claimed that the scouts had chosen to become one with the wilderness and insisted that he had been protecting them from the corruption of modern society. But he refused to provide specific details about what had happened after the bunker was abandoned. Psychological evaluations revealed that Webb was suffering from severe paranoid schizophrenia and had developed elaborate delusions about his role as a guardian of natural order, who was destined to save children from what he perceived as the evils of civilization and modern life. Despite intensive questioning by experienced interrogators and offers of plea bargains in exchange for information about the scouts' location, Webb maintained his silence about their ultimate fate, taking his secrets with him to his grave when he died by suicide in his jail cell 3 weeks after his arrest. The families of the missing scouts attended Webb's brief court appearances, hoping for closure, but finding only more questions and frustration as the legal proceedings failed to provide the answers they desperately sought after 8 years of uncertainty. Expert witnesses testified about Webb's mental state and the likelihood that the scouts had not survived their ordeal. But without bodies or definitive evidence, the families were left to grapple with uncertainty and grief that would never fully heal. The case officially remained open, with investigators continuing to search for the scouts' remains based on clues found in Webb's possessions and statements made during his brief captivity, though hope for finding them alive had long since faded. Memorial services were held for the 5 scouts, allowing their families and community to begin the difficult process of grieving and healing after 8 years of uncertainty and false hope that had consumed their lives. Today, more than 3 decades after that fateful summer night in 1991, the story of the 5 missing scouts continues to resonate throughout Vermont and beyond, serving as a powerful reminder of the importance of vigilance and the enduring strength of community bonds in the face of unimaginable tragedy and loss. The families of Thomas, Sarah, Michael, Lucas, and Emily established the Pine Ridge Foundation, which has provided safety training and resources to youth organizations across the country, ensuring that their children's legacy includes protecting other young people from similar fates and honoring their memory through positive action. The foundation has funded advanced communication equipment for scout troops, wilderness safety programs, and background check systems that have prevented numerous potential tragedies over the years, creating a lasting impact that extends far beyond their original community. Detective Maria Rodriguez, who led the original investigation with unwavering dedication, went on to become a nationally recognized expert in missing persons cases, training law enforcement officers across the country in techniques developed during the search for the Vermont Scouts. The bunker where the scouts were held has been sealed and converted into a memorial site where visitors can learn about the case and the importance of child safety and outdoor activities, serving as a sobering reminder of the dangers that can lurk in seemingly safe environments. Annual memorial hikes are organized each July, bringing together hundreds of participants who walk the same trails the scouts had planned to explore on their final night, carrying candles and sharing stories about the 5 friends who touched so many lives in their brief time together. The case has been featured in numerous documentaries, books, and television programs that have helped educate the public about the realities of child abduction and the importance of community vigilance in protecting vulnerable young people from predators. Mr. Jenkins The former scout leader who carried the burden of guilt for decades eventually found peace through his work with the foundation, dedicating his remaining years to improving safety protocols that have saved countless lives and prevented other families from experiencing similar tragedies. The families, now grandparents themselves, continue to honor their children's memory through advocacy work and community service, demonstrating that even the most devastating losses can be transformed into forces for positive change that benefit others. Their story serves as a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the power of love to create meaning from tragedy, inspiring others to never give up hope and to always fight for justice and truth in the face of overwhelming odds and seemingly impossible circumstances.